Go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for attending the panel portion of today's event. So as you all know, our topic of the Spring Summit is building a career path in STEM, following your passions inside and outside of the lab. And an experience that most of us have as graduate students in STEM largely relates to following a career path in academia. That's mostly what all of us have exposure to. And so the goal of the panel today is to try and learn a little bit about some career paths outside of tenure track academia positions. So to that end, we have three panelists today who are going to tell us a little bit about their journeys coming to their current career paths and just how they're able to get exposure to that and maybe give us some advice about how we can pursue that as current graduate students in STEM. So on our panel today, we have Dr. Cinda P. Scott, who's the Center Director for the Tropical Island Biodiversity Studies at the School for Field Studies. We have Allena Goren DePaoli, who is a project leader at the Boston Consulting Group. And finally, we have Haley Hazlett, who's a program manager at the Declaration on Research Assessment, DORA. And so the way we're going to do this today, I'll give the panelists just a couple minutes to introduce themselves to the audience that we have here and also on Zoom. I'll go ahead and ask a couple of questions to get the Q&A started. And then we can open up questions to those of you attending in person and also over Zoom. The attendees over Zoom, if you could maybe just type a question in the chat and then I can read it aloud for the folks that are attending in person. And that way it'll just make it easier to call on people who have questions. Okay, so without further ado, I will let the panelists introduce themselves. We can start with Haley.
Oh no, I was going to see what everyone else did. I'm Dr. Haley Hazlett. I'm very, very pleased and honored to be here speaking to y'all. So I suppose I'll give a little bit of background where I'm from academically. So I started out going to community college before transferring to get my bachelor's at the University of Texas in San Antonio, Texas. And there I was first exposed to what it was like working in a laboratory. I was very fortunate enough to be brought in on the ground floor for a project that was eventually turned into a provisional patent application where I got experience as an inventor on that. And I came into graduate school with the dream of starting my own biotech business and staying in science forever, essentially. I was accepted into a graduate program at Dartmouth College in New Hampshire, where I got my PhD in microbiology and immunology. And towards the end of it, I decided it actually wasn't for me and got a job ultimately as a program manager with the nonprofit initiative, the Declaration on Research Assessment. And I do work in scientific outreach, science policy, and I will shut up now, but I'm sure we'll talk about it more. So happy to be here, y'all.
Thank you so much. Let's move on to Cinda next.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here with you today. It's an honor to be here. And yeah, so my story, let's see, I'm born and raised in Boston, actually. Grew up in Lexington, Mass. And I made my way into undergraduate at Middlebury College in Vermont. And I completed my undergraduate degree in environmental studies and in conservation biology. And I thought for my whole life I was going to be a veterinarian. And then I did some internships and realized that was not for me. And then I also thought I was going to be a doctor at some point. So I did a pre-medical post-bac program at Columbia in New York. And then I did an internship and realized that I wasn't into like people so much that way. So that was not going to be for me. And then I did a REU, a research experience for undergraduates at the Mount Desert Island Biolabs in Salisbury Cove, Maine. And that forever changed my life, and as well as studying abroad. I studied abroad in Costa Rica. I learned how to scuba dive. And this idea that you could use marine organisms as models for human disease really intrigued me. So I wound up going to fish school. I went to the University of Miami's Rosenstiel School of Marine and Atmospheric Science down in Miami. and completed my PhD in marine molecular evolutionary genomics, and then realized that, yeah, not such a bench person. Really, I actually like talking to people, and I actually really enjoyed teaching. And so wanted to figure out how to combine the teaching, but not do a traditional career path, but also do science, but then also do conservation and, you know, all the things. And so before I got this job at the School for Field Studies, I wound up working at New York City College of Technology. So I skipped the whole postdoc thing because I didn't think that I needed to do it for what I wanted to do. And so, yeah, I worked there for 5 years, and I was an administrator of a grant to improve science, technology, engineering, and math learning at a large community institution that was partly a community college and partly a four-year institution. I really believe strongly in community colleges and having people go through the system and moving on into their careers. And I really loved that educational aspect and getting people to go into the next part of their careers. And so then I also taught in the bio department there. I was kind of all over the place. And then I really was like, I'm done with New York, and packed up my stuff and I moved to Panama for this job. So now I'm the director of a study abroad program here in Panama, and I'm actually in the mountains, but normally I'm in Isla Colón in Bocas del Toro.
Thank you so much. All right, and then finally we'll move on to Allena.
Hi all, Dr. Allena Goren DePaoli. Really excited to be speaking here with you all. I actually attended the very first any GWiSE conference in all of your shoes. So really excited to be talking to you kind of on the other side here. So I actually started out in sort of a similar fashion. I wanted to go into medicine, and in high school, I was really good at chemistry and math. And so I decided chemistry made more sense for a pre-medical student. Started a chemistry degree at the University of Arizona, working with a phenomenal researcher named Dr. F. Ann Walker, doing biological studies of nitroforans, which are proteins implicated in the virulence of Chagas disease. So did a lot of sort of tropical medicine work, and was a bioinorganic chemist by training. Decided about halfway through that not having depth perception made being an anesthesiologist a little bit of a problem. So I decided to not go into medicine, and I decided to go to graduate school instead. And I did my PhD here in Boston at MIT with Dr. Kathy Drennan, doing crystallography of metalloproteins. Also not something great for someone without depth perception, but here we are. And so did work in her lab, and my senior thesis, my PhD thesis ended up being, it's fine, ended up being actually on proteins implicated in the virulence of malaria. So I made all of my way back into tropical diseases, because that is not at all what her lab works on, and figured out toward sort of the middle of my career that I wasn't going to be a bench scientist forever. I wanted to be able to make an impact from a scientific perspective. And so I started looking at different career paths, and figured that I should get a little bit of business training in. And so found consulting as a career path, started looking at it as a career path, and have been at the Boston Consulting Group for about 2 years. I currently work almost exclusively with healthcare companies, as well as private equity firms, thinking about the science of their particular products and how that science can make an impact, and the business decisions that need to go around that science to make the impact that they need to make. I also do a little bit of global health work. So I have done sort of the gamut, and really enjoy my job, and I'm excited to talk to you all about it today.
Thank you all so much. We clearly have quite a diverse panel today, so hopefully we can get a lot of good questions and pick their brains quite a bit in the Q&A section. So I'm just going to start us off with a couple of questions. And the first one is, it sounds like you were all kind of able to pinpoint an experience you had that was able to propel you into your career path outside of academia. And so I was wondering if you could share if there were any resources that were able to help you to do that, and kind of just like general advice for graduate students who are thinking of leaving academia for their career. And it doesn't have to be like one at a time. Anyone can go ahead and jump in if they have advice.
I think one thing that's important is if you're going to get a master's or a PhD, you're never going to leave academia. You're going to leave the structure, but you're not going to actually ever leave sort of the hunt for discovering something new. And I think that is what has always propelled me. So even though I'm more now, I just did a study on the cultural valuation of mangrove ecosystems. I am a molecular evolutionary genomicist, but I still had to use the skills that I learned in my PhD to apply that to a social science study, to inform policy and inform, the management of a marine protected area. So I think it's important for you to understand that you're never going to leave behind all those skills that you gained in graduate school, because they're really important. You're just going to apply them in a different way. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have anybody telling me, oh, you should go into conservation work, or you should go into this or that. I just kind of followed what I thought was interesting. And in 2008, at the height of the economic crisis, when I was about to complete my degree in 2009, doing a postdoc for me was financially just impossible. Like I couldn't do it. Like I didn't know how I was going to survive. I was like, I need to get a job. So that's what I did. But I applied my PhD skills to my administrative job and also teaching. So it didn't end, it just changed.
Yeah, I would absolutely echo Cinda's remarks about how you really just, you take what you learn, because I think something that I've learned is that you think that you don't know much and that your skills might not translate to all the cool stuff that you could do with your PhD or you could do with your master's, but they actually do. You gain a massive amount of skills as you're going through the process of, doing research, getting your PhD, that can be applied in many, many different types of situations. And I think in terms of, I want to try to address the question of how I didn't necessarily learn about my career path through resources through my graduate school. I learned about my career path through a friend of mine who went into science policy. And I think that's, probably speaks to something important about the system and what it values in terms of maybe pushing students towards academia or postdocs. But so it was very much an effort on my part to go out and just bug a lot of people who did things that I thought were interesting and talk to them. And that's how I learned about, the possibility of the career path that I'm on. But yeah.
Yeah, I would again echo all of those sentiments. I was lucky in the sense that MIT's chemistry department had a career panel to learn about alternative careers. So I was sort of handed the opportunity to view a lot of these different careers. But I think had I not been handed that opportunity, there are some wonderful people that work in the sort of more administrative roles within your departments who know where everyone left. They have the institutional knowledge and know where everyone went. And so if you decide that academia is not what you want, start thinking about what are the things that you enjoy? What are the things that you're good at within the lab, right? Maybe that is mentoring other graduate students. Maybe that's, you're good at the sort of logistics of ordering things, right? What are the things that you enjoy? And start talking to the people on the administrative side who understand where people have gone and where those skills can be utilized.
I also think there's a lot of pressure, especially at this stage in graduate school, for your advisor so desperately probably wants you to continue in their route, in their path. And it's okay not to do that. And I think a lot of times we don't hear that enough, and that you are just as successful if you don't. you also never hear that. You never hear that if you don't become this, you know, amazing full-time professor at school, je ne sais quoi, like, yeah, you're not going to be successful, right? But you will be, because if you have the heart and the drive and you love what you're doing, you're always going to be successful. It doesn't matter if it's in academia or outside of it, you will be.
Sure. So kind of along the vein of finding opportunities for yourself, like, you know, it sounds like being really self-motivated, putting yourself out there and avidly networking. Do you have any advice for how to go about like finding a mentor, given that oftentimes the graduate departments aren't going to like offer this advice for you? Or alternatively, do you have any really great mentorship experiences that you'd like to share and just talk about why that person was a particularly good mentor for you?
I'll go. So I think the best mentor that I found in terms of understanding how to make the transition from PhD to science policy, science outreach, would actually be my current program director, Dr. Anna Hatch, and also a very good friend of mine who went into science policy a few years before me. And sometimes, you know, these folks don't come from, you know, established infrastructure that's out there for you. Sometimes you kind of stumble upon these people, and I'd say the best way to do that is to try to network and try to reach out and find folks who are going to be there to support you. And for me, I interviewed for an internship position, for a science policy internship position with Dora, and did not get it the first time, but I kept a contact up with the program director, my current boss. And I said, you know, I love what you do, and I think that this is so fascinating. And I know I have zero experience, but what, you know, can you give me some advice, and can you give me some thoughts? And in Anna, I found someone who was very kind and very interested in helping folks like her find their dream position, like she had. And she gave me opportunities to say, write contributing work for Dora that helped add to my science policy CV. And, you know, I think that would be a person that is a great mentor that I found. And you might surprise yourself, you know, and you can never find those people if you don't reach out to folks and you don't try to talk to people. So I know no one likes hearing that networking is important, but networking is important. Sorry.
It definitely is. And I think the serendipity of finding your mentors, I think you have to be open and honest with who you are and what you're thinking about doing. So one of my mentors while I was in graduate school, actually, I met her at an event for the New England Conservatory, the music school. We were both there because we both cared about music, and I told her that I was interested in consulting coming out of a PhD, and she said, I have a PhD and I'm a consultant, and let's talk. And so she talked with me. She spent a long time talking with me about consulting, what it meant, what I had to do to be competitive for the job, and what I had to do to really make that transition. And there's no way that I would have known when I was thinking that I'm going to go to this event for a music school, that I'm going to meet someone who's going to mentor me throughout my career. But because I was open and I let her know that this is what I was thinking about doing, all of a sudden we connected, and she mentored me, and I still am in contact with her today.
Yeah, so I think one thing that both Allena and Haley have mentioned is just being persistent. So in graduate school, you're given this advisor person, or you're in a lab of someone. These people are not necessarily mentors, and there's a big difference between a mentor and an advisor. And having mentored a lot of students, I now deeply understand what it takes to be a mentor and what I expect in return from a mentee. So the way that I found two of the most magnificent mentors I've had in graduate school, Dr. Laura Fleming, Dr. Alex Warden, are, well, basically I cried in their offices a lot. I was always in their offices crying. And they're like, what is wrong with this child? So I think, I think in that way I was persistent. Like there was something wrong. I didn't feel like I should have been in the place where I was. I felt like I wasn't capable. I felt like I was sort of just doing this song and dance and that I wasn't really meant to be there. And so they instilled in me the confidence. They said, you're here because you got in and you're supposed to be here. So stop this nonsense. And I will tell you, a mentor will tell you when you need to just shut up and do the work. These are the people who are going to tell you to stop it and get your stuff together and figure it out. And they'll help you along the way, but they're going to be a little tough with you. And so I think the tough love approach is kind of the approach that I've also adopted a little bit. But I have a lot of mentees, and I think they're appreciative of that because you need that one person who's going to push you and not give in to your sort of I don't know how you would say that, just everything that's wrong with you in that day. It's like, no, get up, let's try it again, let's do the work. I know you're capable, and you need someone to do that. So that's the difference. An advisor will just be there to tell you what classes to take and when you're going to graduate. A mentor is going to tell you to kick it into high gear, do the work, and get it done. Yeah.
I think, oh, that's wonderful advice. And it was great to hear your experiences about it as well. I think, I think now I'll turn it over to the attendees, both in person and on Zoom, given the time. And so for those on Zoom, you can either type a question in the chat or raise your hand and I will call on you. And then in the meantime, if folks in person have a question, I'll walk over to you with a microphone. Raise your hand. Yes. Oh, sorry.
And also, I just want to shout out to SFS School for Youth Studies because I was in Holland, also during school. Yeah, I just wondering if you guys can share with us like the values that you look for, like the current career path that you perceive that like you decided that I don't want like I want this career path, which is like I don't want to be a study.
Can you repeat the question? We weren't able to hear all of that.
So yeah, I wonder what are the values that you were looking for in your current career path that you're pursuing that maybe you chose the path that you're doing right now versus like the path in academia, like the conventional like push like instead.
So I think you're asking, what are the values?
Yes.
Maybe people can come up because I think the laptop needs to hear you. Sorry. Yeah.
That's better. We can then see your face too. So
Yeah.
So we'll do that from now on. But the question was essentially, what were the values that you looked for in pursuing your current career path? Does that sound right? Okay. Yeah.
Well, for me personally, I felt the need to be, I think after working at New York City College of Technology, I really started to value my intellectual freedom. And in order for me to feel free, I needed to have a job where I was going to have a lot of autonomy. So if you're someone who likes to be the boss, you need to know that. And you need to know how to get to become the boss. And so in my current position as the director of this program, I have a lot of autonomy. I have a team that I direct. I have students that I direct. And I love guiding people. I love that aspect of my work. I also love to create. And I think I was also looking for a job that I could create a program. So I had done some program creation at New York City College of Technology. I created a program for students to have internship opportunities at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And I really loved that process of like going out and talking to architects and engineers and saying, hey, we have students that are architects and engineers, let's put you together, and magic. So I really like doing that in my current job as well, where, you know, we might go out to a really remote island and a student might be like, oh, I'm really interested in how cacao is made. Okay, let's like figure this out and bring people together, and maybe we'll create a community engagement program around it. So I think creativity and autonomy were two very, very important things for me, and also being able to like intellectually grow. And this job allows me to do all of that.
Yeah, I think for me, I learned through graduate school that I really valued the people that I was working with, and I valued the ability to mentor people. I also very much valued learning quickly. And consulting sort of filled all of those buckets. I enjoy the problem solving, but now that I'm on the project leader side, I get to build teams. I get to mentor the team members and make sure that they're fulfilling their development goals and making sure that they're sort of doing well. I always loved teaching during graduate school, and so I'm just doing teaching in a different place now, and I absolutely love it.
Yeah, I got into graduate school, and my first introduction to science was helping to create a cancer therapeutic. And so I hopped in with the idea and the very strong value of wanting to help people and wanting to affect change in the world. And by the end of graduate school, I felt that something needed to change. And I'm not ashamed to say that the pandemic really helped to catalyze that and to crystallize that something needed to change, that I wasn't happy at the bench. As much as I loved problem solving and as much as I loved feeling like I was making a difference there, I wanted to see that change effected more quickly and be a more active participant in affecting change. And that's why policy became very appealing to me, because not only is it a healthy and happy, a good working environment, because folks who usually go into science policy are pretty passionate about being fostering healthy work environments, which you might not always get when you're doing your PhD, but it also, really fills that space in my heart where I want to feel like I'm making the change and helping folks. So that's what drove me to do what I do now.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah, do you mind coming up here and speaking to the laptop? Thanks. Hello. So I have lived in the Northeast my entire life, but I'm I'm up here studying corals, and I'm kind of thinking about moving somewhere closer to the corals. So I'm thinking actually international. So I'm really interested to hear from Cinda about any tips for moving international, what that's like. And then I know even moving across the country or even like out of state, away from your support network and anything, I know that can be really difficult. So if anyone has any tips for how to best approach that, that would be really helpful. Thanks.
Okay, that's a great question. So I think if you haven't yet studied abroad, do that. Whether it be in the semester or it be in a summer program or even a winter program, make sure you are able to get to the corals, whether that be in the Americas or off the coast of Africa, or if it's in Asia somewhere. make sure that you're able to immerse yourself in coral reef ecology. Maybe it's mangroves you're interested in because everything is connected, right? Whatever it might be, or just maybe a basic marine program, or you could just come on my summer program in Panama. But yes, you could do that too. But we also have a program in Turks and Caicos. There are other organizations as well that also are immersive experiences. But I think getting as much experience as possible outside of the country is really important. Especially if you're going to go into any kind of conservation work, it's really important. And I always say this to my students, to have cultural competence in conservation. I think there's a big push right now for the decolonization of conservation, and it's really important to inform your practice to study outside of the United States. So you really need to make sure that you find a program, and again, it could be semester, it could be summer, it could be winter, to immerse yourself in those programs prior to applying to graduate programs or whatever it might be. I'm not quite sure what level you are currently at. But yes, it's scary. I called my mom and I said, hey, I'm moving to Panama. She's like, Panama City, Florida. You're going back to Florida. I said, no, country. She's like, what are you talking about? And I had to pack my stuff in 2 weeks. I put it into storage. It still is there. I'm paying a ridiculous amount of money for that stuff. I need to get it out of there. And yeah, I just took a risk. And I think all the panelists, I think we've all, that's something we probably share in common, is we're risk takers. You follow what you want, not what someone else wants for you. And I just did it and I don't regret it. I love it.
I'll just chime in as someone who went from Texas to New England. And I lived at home the entire time I was getting my undergrad degree. So it was my first time living alone. I didn't know anybody. And I would say wherever you're going, it is very scary, and that's okay. It's gonna feel scary, just, to echo what Cinda said, but it's so, I think it is important to, if that's what you wanna do, make the jump to do what you wanna do. And I would also give a +1 to, if you do a program, that's a network of support built in right there. So I'd highly recommend taking advantage of any of those types of social resources, because it's great to have that little social support network, and try to find those folks when you get there.
Yeah, I'll just echo quickly. I did a summer program in undergrad in Paris, actually, and felt the same thing. I was, for the first 2 weeks, I was miserable. I didn't know anybody. And then I made a friend who happened to be at the University of Arizona when I was there as well. And so we traveled around Paris together, and that became my support network. And so I think that finding the people that are your people is going to help you from a support perspective, even if you're really, really far away from home. And both my husband and I live far away from our families. His is in California and mine's in Arizona. And so we have friend families. And that is our support network, being so far away. And it's what makes living in New England work for us, even though we're so far away from family.
Sure. Great, let me just.
I think we have a question on the Zoom as well.
Yeah. Oh, Simone, hi. You can go ahead and ask your question.
Cool. Well, first of all, thank you all for sharing your insight and advice. It's extremely helpful. My question, I think it probably, thinking about it, I feel like it seems rather simple and like, oh, there's the answer. But essentially, I'm graduating in May, but I feel like grad school has just opened my eyes to all the different areas that I want to do, of things that I want to do. But I don't see how I can I don't see how I'm able to explore all of them, because I'll need to go into a field in like forensic science, and within those fields, it's hard to then like intermingle. like so I can explore the different areas that I want to. How would you suggest, or have any of you experienced like having to deal with, I guess, just having too many interests and pursuing that? I mean, thinking about it, I know it seems like simple, but I don't know. I just wanted a voice box. Yeah.
It's not simple at all. And I guess I'll just start with, I partially went into consulting because I wanted to learn the business skills. I partially went into consulting because I knew that it provided me with a springboard to do other things. And it was, for most people, consulting is not a lifelong career. And so I had the opportunity to pursue things outside while I was doing consulting. So what I would say is, if you're really worried about closing any doors, figure out what the door that leaves the most open is that you're excited about. Alternatively, if you're not worried about closing doors, I would really spend this time talking to other people and exploring what you want your life to look like and figuring out where you want to land. And it's not a simple question. It's very challenging. But these are big decisions, and it's totally fine to be a little nervous about it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. This is very complex. And I think the more you can do internships, the better. I've done like a zillion. I even did one after my PhD at the Wildlife Conservation Society in the Bronx. My mom was living in New York. And again, it was the height of the financial crisis. I didn't have a postdoc. I didn't have a job. I moved home at 31 years old. It was a nightmare living with my mother, but I did it. And I interned as like a grown adult at the Wildlife Conservation Society, because I was like, maybe I didn't know what conservation really was, even though I had done conservation biology in undergrad. I didn't know what the world of conservation looked like. And I thought, do I want to be a part of this? And so I did it for a whole summer before I got like a quote unquote real job, which I hated. When I first had this quote unquote real job, I was dancing in a dance company in New York. So I thought I was going to be a dancer at one point. And, I was all over the place. So my answer for you is you have to try everything. And I know it seems like everything is very rigid, especially maybe in forensic science, but maybe you do an internship in, I don't even know really much about forensic science and DNA analysis. I don't know what they do, like blood stain analysis, or maybe you go and you do, try the different things, try them all. Why can't you do them all? You can do them all. Someone has told you that you can't. And I don't know if it's society, or I don't know if it's your program, or I don't know if it's maybe you're coming up with that idea, but that's not reality. The reality is you can do what you want. You just have to find the path to get there. And that might take networking. It might take more time. And maybe you need to push off grad school. So you're trying to make a decision about grad school, but you don't know what you want to go into.
Graduate. I'm graduating grad school.
You're graduating, but so you want to go into a job or graduate school?
No, I'm going to be finishing graduate school. So probably.
Oh, you're going to be finishing
a job.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, but there's still time, right? Are you?
I mean, if you're graduating in May, it doesn't feel like there's time, because I'm already going to be presenting my thesis like next week, and like trying to find jobs just takes months for forensic scientists. So like, it doesn't feel like there's time to like explore all the things that I would like to.
I might be able to help here a smidge. So I decided that I wanted to make a big career change in the middle of the pandemic, and about a year before I defended. Decided is a strong word. I decided I didn't want to do bench science anymore. And I went to just a ton of panels and did my best to kind of absorb as much information as I could. And some of the best advice that I ever heard is, you don't know what you want to do until you know what you don't want to do. And how I sussed that out, being remote when a lot of internships were closed down, and they were just trying to figure out how to transition to be remote, was to do phone interviews with folks. And I mean, this is, I guess, the very baby step, and something that you can do through your network, or even reaching out to folks on LinkedIn or even over Twitter. There's like a very active academic Twitter. So if there's someone that you follow that you're inspired by or whatever, right, you can remotely do a quick reach out to someone to see if they're interested in a quick 30-minute phone call. And that is a great way, from my experience, to start getting a lot of feedback on all the different things that folks can do. And through phone interviews, I learned that consulting wasn't necessarily for me, because I also wanted to be a consultant for a while. Marketing wasn't for me. A lot of things weren't for me. Working in Congress wasn't for me. And I learned that by talking with people. So I guess, and right, not as close to when I defended, but that's something that you can do. You can start setting those up and you can chat with people. And I think that offered me a lot of clarity. So that would be my advice here. And then, I did an internship and that helped solidify what I want to do. So definitely echo Cinda's thoughts on trying to find that. But I guess the pre-work step would be to just talk to a lot of folks to find out what you don't want to do.
Thank you all. And thank you for your comments, Cinda.
Yeah, I just want to say your first job is not your career. It just isn't. It's a job. And you can move from that job. That's the beauty of these early, career opportunities is exactly what Haley said, you find out what you don't like. I worked at organogenesis. I hated that. I had to suit up in this like clean suit every day and do this microbiology stuff. I was like, what is this? And then I thought, I got to get out of here. And I did. And then I go to the next thing. Don't be afraid. You're going to have, your resume is going to look good. You're getting your degree. You're a motivated person. Believe in that and know that you're going to be okay. You just have to find out where you want to be. And that might take a few jobs.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question and good luck on your upcoming defense and congratulations. All right. Yeah, go ahead, come on up.
Hi, my name's Alexis. Allena, I was just wondering if you could talk a little more about consulting. That's something that I never really considered before, but I'm also kind of hopping off of the lab bench part and kind of want to go more into maybe the business or project manager side. So just more about like what your duties are and stuff.
Sure. Yeah. So hi, Alexis. So consulting is there's two main sort of paths that you can take from a consulting perspective. I took the management path. So it's called management consulting, tends to be a lot more business oriented. You can also take the more sort of science heavy consulting. And so for me, that path would have been like a life sciences consulting career. So like a Clearview or a Clarion. Day to day, the two paths look a little bit different. But generally speaking, what you're doing is you're hired by a client. Well, your team is hired by a client to solve a business problem. That can be anything from, I did one case in medical technology where they were looking at a new technology within the field to see whether or not it was something that they should either be internally developing or if they should be looking to acquire a company because it might disrupt their industry. So I ended up being the scientist on that case, and I got to do a lot of deep reading of clinical trials and papers and all of that to try to identify sort of what the technology was and whether or not it was going to actually disrupt the industry. You can do things like business. So I'm doing an organizational design right now. So looking at a particular business, they have two different medications that they are pulling into sort of one marketing organization. And I have to think about what are the sort of trade-offs for organizing their marketing organization in one way versus another. So the day-to-day is always really different. I would say The overarching is you're learning a lot about business, you're driving business problems, and you're working with another team or a full team of people to solve this problem. And most companies tend to have kind of an apprenticeship model. And so you're learning a lot on the job from other consultants, very similar to kind of what you think from an academic lab, but I think that it's a little bit, the apprenticeship culture is a little bit more ingrained, and I think tends to function a little bit more effectively than it does in an academic lab, given the structure. And so that's kind of the general of my day-to-day. It changes obviously depending on the particular case. And now that I'm what's called a project leader, my day-to-day actually tends to be a lot more thinking through the client's problem from a whole perspective, rather than thinking about one small piece of the problem, and trying to make sure that my team is driving those individual small pieces of the problem, and that we're working together to get that big solution at the end of the day.
Thank you so much.
We have a couple minutes left. If anyone would like to ask any more, let's see. Raise hands in the chat. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Debbie. I'm a first-year master's student. I actually have two questions. The first one is related to financial security, because when younger me was an undergrad and thinking about my future, I would talk to my parents about wanting to follow my ethics and use my scientific knowledge and skills for a good cause and maybe work for a nonprofit. My parents were not too fond of that idea because they said, you need to make money. And so I don't know if maybe I'm limiting myself by not thinking of other options for jobs that I can do this, where I have my ethics and also the science skills and bridge them together and still be financially secure. I don't know if y'all have advice on that, but also second is more about safety as a woman in the workplace. I had a small experience working in a different country last year, and it was there where I noticed that things like, I'm like blanking on the term, but sexism in the workplace, there we go, is still a thing in some countries, and there's still corruption and so in some countries. And so I was wondering, maybe Cinda, I don't know what your experience has been like, but if y'all also had any tips or advice on how to, I don't know, mentally prepare, or maybe just how to navigate these circumstances in different regions, or even here in the US, I suppose. Yeah. Thank you. Do y'all prefer if I stay here, or I don't know if it's weird for you if I disappear?
You can disappear. It's fine.
Okay. Nice
if it's more comfortable, nice to meet you. To sit down, you can sit down. I think, well, let's see. I'm coming up on 8 years in Panama in August, and there are serious differences working in Panama versus in the US, but not really. So what do I mean by that? Well, I think it's a bit more overt, the type of sexism and, in my case, racism that you can experience here versus at home in the US. Both are very present. They just happen in very different ways. I think race, class, and ethnicity, whatever, in Latin America is very different than how it is viewed in the United States. And particularly going through graduate school, I definitely, as a Black woman, had and experienced a lot of trauma going through a system that was never designed with me in mind to be there, especially in marine biology. It was not meant for me. It still isn't that way at all. So you're constantly fighting against a system that never had you in mind. And I think it's important, particularly if you are a student of color, to remember that you are always in this system, and that certain things like finances, having those kinds of worries are real. That goes for all of us, but I particularly think for a lot of Black students and people of color coming from your family background, the culture is telling you that you need to be this success to make money to support the family, because maybe you are from a family where you are going to be the provider because your family works in a collectivistic way. And that is culturally distinct, and it very much so is for students coming from Latin America, for sure. So yeah, it's really complicated. And I would say, yes, I could have become a doctor or the veterinarian that my dad wanted me to become, but I chose marine biology. And to this day, he's like, now, if you had gone to medical school, you wouldn't have this debt. You wouldn't. And I'm like, dude, I got a PhD. Like, can you at least acknowledge that? Like, what is wrong with you? So so I deal with that in my family, in my culture, right? And I think I just said, no, I feel very strongly from a young age. I was really very upset about the climate crisis. In the first time I heard about it was 1995, I think, and I was horrified. And I thought, how are we going to change this? And the more I grew into my work and position, I thought, I really want to help with this crisis. I want to understand the marine environment and how it's involved. I want to do these things. So I followed my passion. And I can tell you, I'm not broke. I can travel the world. I have traveled the world through my job at the School for Field Studies. I have incredible opportunities. I have a salary that I don't pay rent. I don't pay for food. I can do the things that I've always dreamed of. And do I make $1 million? No. Do I need $1 million? Absolutely not. Do I want $1 million? Hell no. I want to live in peace and do the things that I want to do within my capacity, but I can do that through my network. Like, securing funds. I just secured funds from the Ocean Nexus Foundation that works for ocean equity. And as an ocean equity advocate, they invited me to be a fellow. That just came out of the blue because I sat on a panel with the director of the Ocean Nexus Center at UCLA. We were on a panel together, and he's like, I think you should come in and be a visiting fellow. And I said, sure. And the money came with it. And I thought, cool, let's do this project. And so I just think you do need to be a bit more open-minded, but I understand the fear very much so coming from a family that doesn't have generational wealth like a lot of other people going in your programs. If you're particularly a Black woman or a person of color, you don't have the generational wealth to support you. So yeah, that's what I'm going to say about that.
In terms of money, yeah, that's something that I thought about when I was thinking about my future. I was thinking about who's going to pay my mom's medical bills, who's going to help her pay off her house, right? And it's not going to be my brothers, right? I'm the only person amongst my siblings who has a higher education, and I can't lie, like, I love science policy because it feels like, a need in my heart to feel like I'm doing something and doing something that's good. But also it pays better than doing a postdoc. And doing a postdoc with the pay that you get was not enough. It just wasn't enough. I didn't like it enough. The money wasn't good enough to make me want to stay, even though it would have been the easier thing to do. And like Cinda said, I don't make a ton of money. I'm a big fan of transparency. So I make $70,000 a year, which is more than I would have been making as a postdoc. It's not a huge amount of money, but for me it is. And it's certainly enough to live and pay off my student loans and send money home and You know, I'm happy if you're thinking about how much you might make as a working in a nonprofit, like I'm happy for you to reach out to me and we can talk about it. But I also have dental and vision, and that's not something you get working in academia. So yeah, I'd say you can actually make more than you might expect, I would say. But you're certainly, I don't think, going to be a millionaire. But you might be better off than staying in academia.
I guess I'll hit a little bit on the sexism thing. I think Cinda's exactly right here. It's probably more overt outside of the US, but not in my job right now, but I have dealt across a lot of different jobs with sexism in the workplace. And so I think a lot of what I have done as I've pursued my career and looked to try to make sure that I'm in a safe place from a perspective of being a female was to really make sure that I did my due diligence on the people that I was working with. And you may hear like a through line with all of my responses. I care so much, so deeply about the people that I work with, because I feel like for me, the way that I interact with people is so important. And so what I did was make sure that I did a lot of due diligence. And that doesn't necessarily mean only working with women. There are some men out there who are much better advocates for women in the workplace than some women are. And so it really comes down to knowing the people that you're working with and knowing the environment. And sometimes that goes to like actual policy. And sometimes it's really more about the actual culture of the place and it's not written policy. So I would just encourage you as you're thinking, if this is something that you're worried about, whether it be in the US or outside of the US, to think about the culture of the company or the organization, wherever you land, to really try to make sure that you're finding a place that is equitable in the way that they treat their people.
So much. Yeah, I was going to say that brings us to the hour, but if you have a quick question or comment, is there? Yeah. Yeah, if anyone has any last minute quick questions or comments, feel free to ask them now. Yeah, go ahead.
Hello. So this kind of gets to what you were just saying, Allena, but like for everybody, how do you suss out like who you're going to be working with in like an interviewing kind of stage of things? Yeah, or suss out the climate, the culture, things like that. You guys have any specific questions that you like to ask?
Yeah, so I guess I started this question, so I'll answer first here. So a couple of things. One, you in most interviews, you should get the opportunity to ask questions of the company, and so you should feel empowered to ask questions. Sometimes you don't want to say, "I'm a woman. How do you treat women?" Sometimes you want to go with slightly better, slightly more nuanced questions, I guess. And so you can start asking, like, what are the maternity policies? What do the team structures look like? What are typical policies for dealing with outside of work commitments? So, like for me at the Boston Consulting Group, we work within each of our teams to make sure that any sort of outside commitments are taken care of and you have the support from your team structure. And so I actually end up interviewing on a regular basis because every time I do a new case, it's with a new team. And so a lot of what I do when I'm doing this interviewing process is think, what are the accommodations that you're going to be able to make for me if, say, I have to come home and take care of my dog because my husband had something that he needed to do. And just really going for those questions about sort of how people will treat you when you deal with those emergency situations, and also maternity policies, because those are a big deal.
That's great, thank you.
I think you can kind of also go right for the jugular by asking about diversity, equity, and inclusion policies. And if they don't have an answer and they don't know how to answer it, or if they feel on the defensive, then you know right away you need to run. I'm sorry, you've got to go. I think it's really actually for anybody, I don't care what color you are, you need to ask the question about DEI. Because if your company doesn't even have that in place, or if they're not actively working toward an equitable workspace for everyone, they're not working for it for women either. It's not going to happen. So I think you need to ask that question no matter who you are. What is the company doing to make this an equitable workspace? And if they don't have a response, or they say, well, you know, no, I'm sorry, run, really. Yeah. That's my 2 cents.
So my current position is a little bit unique because it's just me and my program director, just the 2 of us, and we are both women. And she's currently out on maternity leave right now. So when I interviewed for this position, you know, or even taking a step back, for the internship that I had before getting this position, we had a very candid conversation about what it's like to be a woman, what it's like to be a woman going through graduate school and trying to change career fields and being in the policy space. And one of the reasons why I like the policy space is because folks are actively thinking about this, and it would be bad for a policy organization that advocates for diversity, equity, and inclusion to not be actively thinking about these things and trying to foster that in the workplace, which is one of the reasons why I quite like the job that I'm in now. People are thinking about that and aware of that. But for, say, the consulting jobs that I interviewed for when I still wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, you know, I usually just asked about workplace culture, and most of the time, if someone bristled, then that told me, you know, what I needed to know. So it can be hard to ask those questions. It can be scary, but they are important because that impacts, you know, like Allena mentioned, your day-to-day, the folks that you're working with. And if they don't value you as a human being and your experiences as a human being, then, you know, that's a good way to try to get an initial judge of that, I think.
Sure. Okay, that brings us to our time for today, and I think that's great advice to end on. So if everyone could please join me in thanking our panelists. Thank you all so much for being here and having this discussion with us. It's wonderful to hear about all your accomplishments, but also I think, you know, your passion for your field and your career really shines through in your answers. And so it was wonderful to hear about that. And it was a pleasure to have you at our summit today. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Thank you. It was nice to meet everybody.
Have a wonderful rest of your weekend.
You too.
Thank you.